And then we're gonna start speaking. Exactly.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending our March League of Women Voters of Linn County Legislative Forum. I am Karen Lewis, the secretary of our local Linn County League. Since its founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. Through its mission, the League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Today's forum is part of our voter education efforts. All of our Linn County legislators have been invited to participate in today's forum, and we are pleased to have the following lawmakers with us here today. From District 65, Representative Bennett, and from District 69, Representative Marquardt. Good morning. I did, thank you. And over here we have from District 68, Representative Donahue. From District 95, Representative McClintock. And from Senate District 35, Senator Taylor. And from House District 67, at the far table, is Representative Jardy. And then we have from Representative District 66, Representative Stead. And District 70, Representative Ellert. And at the end is Senate District 33, Senator Hogue. Thank you all for participating today. A little bit about our format. So we will be asking questions till about 11:30 with time for opening and closing statements. After 11:30, we're going to wrap up, but leave a few minutes here in the Beems Auditorium so that you can ask your representatives questions that you may have. Each legislator will have 1.5 minutes for an opening statement. And then rather than every legislator feel like they need to answer every question, if you choose to answer a question, we have a podium over here where you can share your answer. If a particular topic is not something you care to speak on but would like to yield your time to another legislator, please do so at the beginning so they can have enjoy those extra few minutes of yielded time. Let's see. We're also going to do closing statements where you'll have another 90 seconds. And we have a timer sitting in the front who will hold up 1 minute, the green card, and then a 30-second, and then finally the stop card. All right, so with that, I think we're ready to begin, and I will start with Representative Marquardt for opening statements, and we'll just proceed down the row here. Thank you.
So get up and go.
Sorry, yes, oh, I should have thought about that.
Good morning. I'm Kirsten Marquardt, State Representative on the West Side for House District 69. Excited to be here today. You know, it's always great to be home, especially after a couple hard weeks at the legislature. You can, sometimes it's difficult to see some of our work in action, but this week we were able to see a couple things that are bad for our community and for workers and people we prioritize get killed, and so, or not move forward this week. And so that's actually a victory in itself. So we try to make sure we focus on our victories as well and listen to what our constituents have to say, and excited to be here today and answer some of the wonderful questions that you all have. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm State Representative Liz Bennett from House District 65 in Cedar Rapids. It's been a busy time at the Capitol this week and this entire session. I know that, speaking for myself and a lot of my colleagues, what we've worked on this session is really trying to fund our public schools. Democrats had a plan to invest $300 million in our public schools because we believe that you should be able to start here in Iowa, and we hope you stay in Iowa, but if you need to take a little trip, we want you to be able to go anywhere. I've been hoping to see more movement on clean water legislation this year. We haven't seen a whole lot of movement on clean water. I don't know if that'll sneak in the last minutes, but I suspect not. But we've also seen some legislation that would be really hurtful to people who have been working really, really hard. We know that working folks have kept us all afloat. We're all working folks, but essential workers have kept us all afloat during the pandemic. And I think a lot of us believe that it's time for them to get a break. And what we've seen instead, are things that would dramatically cut back on the unemployment that a lot of people are, really working on. So luckily, it appears that that is not working or moving forward. And we're just going to keep looking out for regular folks in Iowa and trying to make Iowa the best possible place to live, work, and play.
Good morning, everybody. I am State Representative Molly Donahue, and I represent Marion, Bertram, and parts of Cedar Rapids. Some of the things have already been said today that we've been working on. We've had some wins this year and obviously some losses, but we're continuing to fight. We still have a couple of bills in education that we are keeping an eye on with vouchers coming up. But as someone else said, we're looking for $300 million to be put into public schools rather than into corporate pockets. We're looking for growing our workforce. We have a workforce issue here in Cedar Rapids and all around the country. Lots of open jobs. We need to fill those. We need our kids to come back to Iowa if they've left. We need to make sure that Iowa is a vibrant place to live and work and play. We want to make sure that we're supporting and trusting our educators because they are helping grow our workforce. We need to believe in science. And we need to make sure that we're ensuring affordable and accessible childcare and housing. Waiting to talk to all of you about the questions that you have, and thanks for being here.
Thank you to the League for hosting today. It's good to be here. I'm Charlie McClintock. I'm with District 95 in Iowa House. So, we get towards the end of the session, or the latter part of it after the funnels, and a lot of folks are, what are you working on? Where is this bill at? What are you doing? And it can be kind of confusing if you're not following things or you're up on how the legislature works. So after the funnels, certain bills die, or they can be strike afters, or bills can change with the way it works up there. It can be a little bit confusing. So as we answer questions today or after we're done, I'll be happy to talk to anyone about where bills are at or what's going on or as the dialogue unfolds today. So a lot of bills are no longer active, or bills that you may be concerned with can come back to life in certain forms because how leadership can deal with them. So be happy to talk to anyone afterwards on that. So and then we're also dealing with budget. And we'll be working that over the next couple of weeks in the legislature. So those are the main things that I wanted to make sure that if people have questions on, we'll be able to deal with today. So thank you for having me.
Good morning, State Senator Todd Taylor. Happy to be here and participate in this open public forum. I think it's very topical, as Representative McClintock said. The legislature just finished their second funnel, and so bills have to be out of the opposite chamber the second time around. And today's Gazette is a pretty good list of those that are still alive and those that are dead. However, there's several mechanisms in place that you can resurrect a bill or copy and paste it to another bill, so stay tuned. I also should start off by saying too, I know our colleague Senator Mathis could not be with us today. She has a funeral to attend. And with the second funnel going through, the next thing that we have to deal with besides any policy bills is the budget. And I'm the ranking member of the justice system budget, so we'll deal with the judicial branch budget and the court system and everything that has to do with that. On the one bill and another bill, two bills, will be the whole entire public safety delivery system. And so that leadership role, I appreciate that I have that for my caucus, but I have grave concerns that the majority party will not take any input from us. Doesn't mean I won't give it, doesn't mean we won't fight for things, but that's kind of how they've chosen to operate things. The other thing in the minority, just kind of illustrating the point, that I don't often get to choose which policy bills I work on. Some of them have huge impact and some of them have minor impact. I'm working on bills relative to, I better stop though, dang, I'm gonna bring that up later. Keep you on time.
Good morning, I am State Representative Eric Jurdy, and I currently represent parts of Marion, Northeast Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Robbins. Again, I would like to say thank you very much to the League of Women Voters as well for this forum. This is my official first in-person forum that I've had, and so it's great to be here and see folks in the audience rather than just looking at the computer screen. I can say, and certainly speak for myself, but I also think I speak for Iowa House Democrats when I say that we are continuing to work on a lot of issues. We know that Iowans are exhausted and oftentimes get fed up with the political process. But that doesn't mean we stop listening, and we don't stop listening. We start working with folks, hopefully across the aisle, to get things done here at the final time. Iowa Democrats and myself, we want to ensure that we grow Iowa's workforce and address the child care crisis. We want to ensure that we keep public monies in our public school system. We want to make sure that Iowans don't get left behind, and ultimately, we want to make sure that we put money back in the pockets of our working class Iowans. I'm looking forward to addressing your questions and concerns and hopefully taking suggestions with us back to Des Moines as we wrap up the last handful of weeks of the session. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Art Stagg from Northeast Cedar Rapids. That's House District 66. I just wanted to thank League of Women Voters, first of all, and for all of you that are participating, those of you who are here and those of you who are watching. It's the most important part of our democracy is that we have your input and that we address your issues. I look forward to answering questions today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Tracy Ellert. I serve part of the west side of Cedar Rapids, Covington, a little bit of Halo. I've been busy this session working on education-related bills, childcare-related bills, have some updates on the childcare ones. I'm sure there'll be some questions on those. And then I've been assigned to the voucher and the teacher transparency bill, which I have a feeling some questions might come through on those ones as well. So look forward to answering those. Thank you.
Good morning, Rob Hogue, State Senator from Cedar Rapids, and unlike Representative Jurdy, this is my last League of Women Voters Forum. So after 20 years, I do want to thank the League of Women Voters for its work over the years. This forum has always been a very important way to share with the community directly what was happening in the state legislature, and we really need more of that civic engagement in our community and in our state today, really more than ever. Like many of you, very worried about what's happening in Ukraine. The Iowa Senate did pass a resolution this week and hopefully keep up the pressure on Russia economically and by every other means possible. One bill that I was able to engage in a little bit was a bill that came over from the House. It seemed like a technical insurance bill, but turned out to be something that really endangered the interests of homeowners after a disaster, thanks to some constituents who had been through the process after the derecho and some lawyers here locally, and tragically, thanks to the tornado. I mean, the tornado happens, kills those people, and after that happened, I think the Senate Republicans looked at it and said, boy, we can't do it. It's an example of why you want to have a deliberate, slow legislative process. Very disturbed when I saw in the paper this week a Republican say that Iowans don't care about the process, they just want results. But you do want a deliberate, slow legislative process for a reason. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for opening statements. Everyone hear me? I think my mic got lowered as well. Okay. A reminder to our audience, throughout the process, if you do have a question, you can raise your hand and one of our question sorters will come by and pick that up. We have a few to get started though. Our first topic is education. And the question is, do you support a shift in taxpayer funding for K-12 public schools into scholarships for private school tuition? So again, any legislator can select that question.
I want to say that number one, I am 100% for choice in Iowa. For parents should have the right to send their kids to school where they want to and teach them how they want to, but our public funds should not follow. The public funds are for a common good, and it's for everyone, not for specific people who are allowed to go to those institutions, whether it be homeschool or a parochial school or a charter school, some kind of private. So no, I do not agree that the funds should follow.
If you remember in the first month of session, we had a debate over supplemental aid for public schools. And we settled on 2.5% in the House and Senate. That was the Republicans and the governor's wishes. If you remember, Democrats had a bill for 5% that I introduced for 5% for our schools, but they couldn't find enough money. They weren't willing to support the public schools at the 5%, which was needed to keep up with inflation and rising costs in our schools and prevent larger class sizes and losing more teachers. But there wasn't enough money. Now suddenly there's enough money for vouchers to take public funds for private individuals. So I'm opposed as well.
I too, like Representative Donahue, absolutely support the choice, and we have that already in Iowa. Parents can choose which education setting fits their children, whether they want to homeschool them, have public school, private school, online, or so on. But I do not support the student first scholarships, vouchers, anything that takes funds away from public school system. And one thing that my colleagues haven't mentioned so far is that those private school options do not have to follow the same set of standards as the public schools, and that's one of the biggest issues with it.
I want to touch just on that a little bit. As a public educator, I've taught in the public school system, special education, for the last 20 years. I look at it through that lens. I look at it through the lens as a parent of 3 daughters. As Representative Allard had mentioned, private schools do not have to accept the same type of students that public schools do. At Jefferson, we'll take every single student that lives in our Jefferson boundary, regardless of their situation, regardless of their socioeconomic class, regardless of their education, acceleration, or deficiencies. Private schools do not. And I have 2 daughters with IEPs. School choice may not actually be a choice for them because of their disability. We need to ensure that everybody has access to a great education in the state of Iowa, and that starts with our public education system.
Thank you, Representative Dirty. I love what you said. So I want to speak to this as somebody who went to both public and private school. I think one of the most wonderful things about Iowa is that we do have lots of different options for people here, whether you're talking about preschool, K through 12, or colleges and universities. That's a wonderful thing. But our public schools are a right, a responsibility, and a cornerstone of our democracy. A strong public school and a system of strong public schools is what you build a strong democracy on with an educated populace. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I had. You know, my family decided that for a while they wanted to send me to a private school, but that didn't work out for me. And thank God that there was a strong public school there for me to go to and finish my education and graduate and go on to other things. So I'm not in favor of doing anything that would take money out of our public schools. We need to maintain those just like we would maintain anything else that is absolutely essential to our democracy.
I think the area that I work on and focus on in the Iowa legislature quite a bit is economic development and workforce development. And one thing, when we're trying to attract people to Iowa or to keep the people who are here, the number one thing that parents and folks look for are good quality public schools. That's what brings people here, that's what keeps people here, and that's what makes our state the kind of place where you want to raise your family. And so I am in support of, you know, public funds for public schools. Of course, I'm supportive of the choice that people have right now, but we have to keep that core public school quality that we have in the state of Iowa and continue to progress that if we want to have the kind of state that we want that is a place where you want to live, grow, and raise your family. Thank you.
I too would echo those sentiments of my colleagues and just also say that there's a lot of deception about this bill that's out there, because it used to be called vouchers and now it's called scholarships. And scholarships sure sound like a good idea. Kids need scholarships. But what that is funneling public dollars into private schools. And then that continues to degrade public schools. And then they say, well, gosh, you know, we need to have more and more choice. And then, as Representative State said, now all of a sudden they have the money. I don't know, what is the bill tag about 50 million? 60 million? Now they have it, you know. So that's a problem. And Iowa used to be the top 4 or 5 in the country for schools, and we're slipping. And we're slipping because we're starving them, and they're not keeping up with the cost of living, and now we're saying, well, we have to have scholarships. So there's a lot of deception about that, deception about the bill, and we've got to be careful because the constituent emails that we get make it sound so simple, but it is so devastating. So I'm a no.
So, speaking from the majority here in the House, you may expect me to be in favor of ESAs or vouchers. I am not. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, when the schools come to the legislature and they say we need funding, whether it's for overall budgets or it's for the students, if they ask for the funding for the programs that they need and we don't give them what they need, then you can't turn around and now say, okay, then give us an alternative for vouchers or for scholarships or however you want to word it. It's got to go one way or the other. So I would also be a no on this. And that's not a talking point. Representative State had excellent amendments. I voted for both, and they didn't go through. And I was a no on SSA because it was underfunded this year. And I was a no last year because it was underfunded on SSA. So I support our public schools, and I will definitely be a no on ESAs as it's presented, so it definitely needs work. Thank you.
I do not support the proposal. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We have a lot of great topics everyone submitted questions on, so I'm going to move on to Medicaid. The question is, do you think Medicaid services have improved for Iowans since it was changed from a state-operated program to an out-of-state company? So who might like to answer a Medicaid question? We'll start with Ben.
I'll jump up first. Absolutely not. They are not better off with the MCOs and the privatization of those programs. In fact, with the workforce shortage here in Iowa, it is far worse over the last few years because we don't have the workers here or trained that are able to help our most vulnerable Iowans. So absolutely, this is not doing better. And they also have had so many different issues with MCOs leaving and having to transfer and then losing whatever services they could find, and then they had to start over. It's a debacle. And so no, they are not better off. Thank you.
I'll be brief on this. No. And I think it's pretty easy to see why. When you are introducing a profit motive into healthcare, you're going to have the problems that we've seen all along since Medicaid was privatized in the state. I've continued to receive contacts from constituents and other Iowans who are just looking for some help because the needed services, even that maybe they were getting before or their children were getting before, have suddenly become a battle. So I think introducing that profit motive into the system has been really harmful to Iowans, and no, it's certainly not better.
I'm another no, and I've experienced this firsthand myself. My children were on Medicaid right when it switched, so we had the experience beforehand and the experience after, and I won't go into that situation. It did eventually get taken care of, but it's a similar situation that I hear from a lot of my constituents of things not getting paid. And then we also have the flip side on the providers, and so many of them not getting what they should be getting, especially, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about dental, and if you have Medicaid for dental, it's near impossible to find someone that will take it. So on both ends, the provider and our constituents, Medicaid has been worse.
Like Representative Ellert, when our twins were born, we qualified for Medicaid because of the situation that they're in. I will tell you that Medicaid was a phenomenal resource for us. It allowed us to focus on what we needed to do as brand new parents, and that was love and take care of our kids and not necessarily have to worry about the cost. Right now, I know that there are still families that are struggling to get access to the health care that their children require. Health care is a right. Nobody should have to bargain, nobody should have to negotiate for health care, and particularly health care for your kids. Others have mentioned providers are not getting reimbursed the way that they ought to get reimbursed. We have health care shortages and deserts in our state. Some folks have to drive across multiple county lines to go to a specialist to get the care that they need for their loved one, and that's not right, and we need to do better as a state of Iowa.
In the last 2 or 3 years of the Branstad administration, they pushed this idea, and I was in the House and House Appropriations Committee, and I asked the Director of Human Services who would help administer this. You say you're going to save $20 million. How is it that you're going to save that $20 million other than cutting services, cutting benefits, and slow paying and extending the payments? Oh, no, this is going to make it more efficient and snappy and everything, and years later we found that hasn't happened. Another thing is, on the Budget Committee, it's not easy to budget for Medicaid, and if we don't do enough the first year, then the first bill we have to do the next year is a supplemental to pay for information or pay for the delivery of services. So we fixed that a little bit, but basically how we did that is find more money for it, and then not pay the providers, and then they are not paying for the needs of the people. And these are the needs of people, children, seniors, many Iowans. Over 60% don't think that this is a good idea. So I haven't seen any better proposals, so what they have right now isn't working.
Looks like we can move on to our next question, and the topic is water quality. What should our state legislature be doing to protect our water quality, specific to drinking water?
Well, there are a lot of topics to deal with water quality, but there aren't many bills in the legislature that are dealing with it. I have a CAFO bill, which is a confined animal feeding operations, to put a moratorium on them. and to make the large agricultural businesses responsible for the spills. But that didn't even get a subcommittee hearing in the House. Didn't make it to the committee. No subcommittee was assigned. They didn't want to discuss it. And that remains true after probably 8 years of submitting CAFO legislation. Also, our wells, particularly our private wells, are not regularly tested. DNR doesn't have enough staff to do that. So we're not sure what contaminants are in the personal wells throughout the state. We also see closures to our lakes and streams each year because of the toxic situations in those streams, because of the nitrates and phosphates in our waters. We have a voluntary system reduction. We're supposed to hit 46% reduction, and we're on track to do that in about 1,000 years. No, really, there are no baselines that have been established on how we change or improve our water quality system. So it's something that isn't being addressed whatsoever in any capacity by the legislature. And Republicans have insisted on not moving any of the legislation that we proposed.
I agree with Representative State, and I think what's been really, really difficult is that for most people, you know, common sense is to say that if you're involved in a situation, you should come to the table and you should do what you can to be responsible for that situation. You know, I think our basic social contract is that we all come together and we all do our fair share, our fair part. There's just been a real aversion to asking those who are the polluters to come to the table and be responsible for the damage that that's being done. So, you know, what happens in that case is the situation that Representative State discussed, where our natural resources are polluted. We have streams and lakes that we can't swim in. We have drinking water issues, you know, where Des Moines is having to sue people who are upstream from them. So it's really harmful, and really there needs to be some folks with some internal or intestinal fortitude in the legislature and the governor's office to cause people to come to the table to be responsible for the pollution they are causing.
In addition to the pollution that both Representative Bennett and Representative State have talked about, we have some other issues as well. Our water should not be for sale to the highest bidder. Our aquifer should not be sold by the governor off to California for bottled water or whatever purpose. We also need to be careful with some of the things that are happening around our farmland, like the CO2 lines that are going to be coming through. Those can also damage our water if they are not put in properly or put in the wrong places. So there are lots of things that we need to be working on, but the number one thing is we have to make sure that the people who are donating the most money to make sure that they get what they want and it's damaging our streams and our waterways. We cannot have our water be sold to the highest bidders, personally. That's my opinion.
All right, I'll just add a couple things. And Representative State, for those who don't know, is the leader in Iowa for the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators and does a great job in that role. Obviously, we have a very significant water quality problem in the state. Over half of our waters that are tested are impaired. We have communities, plural, that do not have safe drinking water, and we are the second leading contributor among the states to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. The problem is, in the legislature right now, most of the proposals are taking us in the wrong direction. This year there was a proposal to arbitrarily limit the amount of money that the state or county conservation boards could pay when buying property for conservation purposes. Now it appears, at least so far, that we have stopped that proposal, but it's the wrong direction. It's just flat out the wrong direction what we're dealing with. I will say one other thing. You will occasionally, just as a cautionary note,
I'll yield my time.
Well, I'm about done, Todd, thank you. You'll hear things being invested, watch the source of the money. A lot of that money is still American Rescue Plan money coming from the federal government. And you just need to be aware that, if that's the source of the money, whether it's healthcare or natural resources, the economic development, you need to be aware of those things. And we've tried in the past to do comprehensive water policy, but right now we're just fighting little battles to stop us from taking big steps in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Let me just say it's not all doom and gloom. I sit on Ag and Natural Resources, and we saw some really good stuff coming out of our colleges and universities on water quality and control that they were doing. Really good initiatives. They're trying hard. And I was a mayor before I was in the Iowa House. We have excellent water quality in our city. And I know we have problems. I don't argue what Representative State was saying, or Representative Bennett. We do have issues with upstream issues coming down that we don't have control of and that we do need to work on. But I don't want to say it's all doom and gloom, that we do have our colleges working on excellent initiatives for us. Thank you.
Someone yield your time to Representative Stitt. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention what it's like in the Iowa House in reference to environmental issues. I'm a member of the Environmental Protection Committee, and we have what I refer to now as an annual meeting. Instead of meeting each week in the session, we have one meeting where the chair, Representative Fisher, tells us that this is our last meeting and that we will not be considering any environmental bills.
Okay, thank you. On water quality. Our next topic is childcare. Do you support legislation to allow 16-year-olds to be a child care provider without an older provider present?
No surprise that I'm going to be the first one to start on this. I do not. I fully support having our minors working in childcare. I think it's a great pipeline to get them into early ed, maybe even K through 12 later on. However, you need that coaching and mentoring process, because if this bill were to go through, which it has in the House, it's still over in the Senate, but if it were to go through, those 16, 17-year-olds could potentially be in the classroom alone from day one. So who shows them the correct way to do things, and who's there to coach and mentor them and make sure that they're a high-quality provider? There's also, safety issues. We're hearing from many insurance companies that they would not cover this. I do not support that at all, but I do support them working with supervision.
She is our resident expert, just so you know. But I also do not agree with this. It's not just because they are minors working in the room by themselves, but we have other bills that are going to possibly make it through that would enlarge the classes. So not only would they be alone in those classrooms, possibly without the training and the mentoring and knowing that they're quality workers, they could also have more students than are allowed now with adults that are trained and professionally prepared to do this job. So I am a hard no on that.
I'm a no on that as well, and have been. Appreciate Representative Ellert's leadership on it. I have a 15-year-old, and some days, he'll probably kill me for saying this, but just reminding him to brush his teeth every morning before he gets going and doing things seems to be a challenge. And so having a 16-year-old who's in charge of overseeing multiple children unsupervised is a big deal. The thing about childcare, though, that I did want to bring up, we keep having over and over again, there'll be, and we'll probably see it at the end of the session again, another committee to study the problems that we have with childcare. And it's frustrating because the number one thing that keeps popping up is we need to pay our childcare workers a livable wage. or they're being lost to McDonald's, or they're being lost to other areas where they just can't afford to serve as a child care worker, where they want to serve, to take care of our children. And so it's, we keep dancing around it. I serve on appropriations, and I'm also the Democrat leader in the House for Economic Development. We were able to work with my counterpart on the other side of the aisle and work to get child care challenge grant matching funds for employers. But that still does not address the issue of the quality workforce that we need, and we need to pay folks as professionals who take care of and raise our children, our biggest investment in our future of our state. Thank you.
I voted no on allowing 16-year-olds to be unsupervised with a group of kids for lots of reasons. But one, from my personal experience, I'm a teacher of 40 years, retired now, but I've been in a lot of different classroom situations, and I recall one of them where I was covering for another teacher to substitute with some kindergartners. I think there were maybe 15 to 20 kindergartners, and it was frightening. It was actually frightening. It didn't take but minutes before I lost control. And so if you took any kind of action to get them to do something, they would either cry or ignore you. And so I can't imagine a 16-year-old having to deal with that situation. It's not good for them or for the students.
As an educator, I have to say that my wife is also an educator. She's an early childhood educator in the Cedar Rapids School District. So if I didn't address this issue, I'm not sure the garage door would be open when I came home today. But the real question, I think, comes down to what are you expecting from your children's early education experience? Are you expecting babysitting? Are you expecting early childhood education? A 16-year-old, I think, is fully qualified to babysit my kids. I've got 3 of them. I'm not sure that I would say, my 3 kids, you're going to go learn and get your early childhood education from a 16-year-old. That's a big difference. The other issue is parental rights. When we have parents that may be divorced, may be separated, maybe not be able to access a particular child for any reason, oftentimes those come to fruition at daycare centers, at schools, at church youth group events where a parent might come and say, let's go home. Well, that parent may not have legal access to this child for a number of reasons. I'm not sure that I want a 16-year-old having to be responsible for that situation and deciding, should this child go with this parent or this parent, now what happens? So there's a lot that needs to be done, but I would be a no on that. Thank you.
I think this is another good example of bipartisan voting. I was a no on this. And, I started in law enforcement when I was 19, and Representative Jardy can confirm this also, working in law enforcement. One of the top 3 areas in which we had disputes over child custody is either at home work or at school child care facilities. And a 16-year-old is, you could say they're 16, but they're 15 in 366 days, right? I mean, it's a young person that would be there. And I agree with Representative Ellert. That's no problem if they're supervised, but that's putting a kid in a very bad position that has to oversee a lot of people or a lot of kids themselves, and then they're alone doing that. It's just not a good idea, and we need to do better for that. So I was a no. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next topic is the CO2 pipeline. The question is, regarding the CO2 pipelines proposed through Linn County, what is your stance on the use of eminent domain to allow, or if the pipeline should be built?
This is a a subject near and dear to me. I've been to many of those CO2 pipeline meetings and been in many discussions with landowners. This is just one of the things that is affecting our landowners, as has been said before. They aren't allowed to sell their land for solar, or they aren't allowed to do many different things because of one group saying that the land is too good for that. But with the CO2, my position with this in eminent domain is that we should not be utilizing eminent domain for private profit. Eminent domain should only be used for the good of all. And this is not doing anything for Iowa. It is, however, allowing some Texas companies and maybe one company here in Iowa to make more money, because it is worth money or they wouldn't be doing this. So I do not agree with the eminent domain, and I do believe that next week I will be working with Representative Bobby Kaufman to try to get something through that will at least protect the landowners for the next couple of years, while we can work on something to make sure that the utility boards don't use eminent domain on these landowners' properties. Thank you.
I am also against using eminent domain, especially for private companies making a profit. The Linn County put a resolution forth saying that they also believe that to be true. I appreciate that. I have met at the Capitol and back here at home several times with, right now it looks like what would happen in Linn County would be ADM working with Wolf. I don't know if Navigator is still going to have a path through Linn County. It doesn't necessarily look like that so much right now. The problem is, Navigator came through and they had it going through my own child's school district right next to the school, and also going through some of my neighbor's property and some of our neighborhoods. And with some of the safety concerns we have with some of this very new technology of CO2 pipelines, we need to not only work across party lines, but we need to be able to use all the resources we have right now to be communicating with the folks who are going to be pushing pipelines in our area about what it means in our community, not to go through neighborhoods, not to go through school districts, that is unacceptable to all of us, and that we need to come up with a better solution as a community moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, let me start by saying I believe it's wrong to take land for private gain. So I agree with what Representative Donahue said about that. Historically, we should have stopped the oil pipeline through Iowa. And when Democrats were in charge of the Senate in 2015 and 16, we brought a bill out of committee. Representative Kaufman said he was going to bring a bill out of his committee and never did. Right? Because Republicans had the House, we had the Senate. We were going to do that together and stop the oil pipeline. Because an oil pipeline in an age of climate change is morally egregious and takes private land for public gain. Carbon pipeline, little trickier. I'm still opposed to it. One of the technical problems is, what are you going to use the carbon for when it leaves the state? Iowa would give up regulatory control over that, because it could be used for enhanced oil production, which is also morally egregious. It is hazardous. There have been accidents with carbon pipelines. It's a danger. And here's the final point I want to make. In the 2020s, we have to spend all the money we possibly can for a clean energy transition and get it done and wean ourselves from fossil fuels entirely. The carbon pipeline is not achieving that. It is a continues to be a fossil fuel dependent industry. Thank you.
Another issue with these pipelines, so first of all, to directly answer the question, no eminent domain for private gain. So that's number one. Number two, what doesn't get discussed a lot with a lot of these new technologies. And not that I don't like new technology, I love new technology. I work in the tech sector, but the surety bonding for pipelines, we researched this when oil pipelines were being discussed. The surety bonding on these type of pipelines is often very, very loose, very underregulated. So you have the question that happens, well, okay, so now somebody's taken land, their company is profiting off of these pipelines. What happens to our community, our water, our soil, when there is a leak, as there inevitably will be? Things wear out, things fail. So there hasn't even been an appropriate discussion in the state about holding these companies accountable for inevitable environmental disasters.
I want to say that one of the intended purposes of the pipeline, this whole thing, is to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And instead of reducing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with renewable energies and other resources, this is simply the capture of it, capture the CO2 and putting it back in the ground. So it doesn't really reduce the emissions that are produced. When everybody just think about that for a minute. So if the ethanol producers and other industries are able to continue with the CO2 emissions that are then captured and put into the ground, we should be addressing the technology to actually reduce the amount that's produced in the first place.
Okay, thank you. The next topic is the bottle bill. So what provisions should or has the legislature made for citizens without transportation to be able to travel 20 miles to deposit cans or bottles?
This bill has been up every year. I've been there 4 years and we have not come up with a good way to do this yet. One of the provisions that was worked on with Representative Eisenhart and Representative Bohannon and myself when we were on the bottle bill is to make sure that the redemption centers are receiving more funding so that they can either drive their trucks to the grocery stores and park for the day and collect those so people still can just go to their home grocery store instead of having to drive. Unfortunately, many of the people in more rural areas would have a 10-mile radius of which each redemption center would be, but with the funding increase, they would be able to build more redemption centers, which would be helpful. But making sure that we could still redeem them at the grocery stores where you bought them and for cash, not for credit. So those are some of the things we worked on to make sure that those were available at people's neighborhood stores.
I'll just say this, that there are a lot of details, and I know Representative Donahue and others have been really engaged on it, and I really applaud them for that. I just want to take a step back to the bigger picture, which is why do we have a deposit law in Iowa? Well, if you go back to the 1970s, it was because of excessive trash in the ditches, primarily. And the deposit has been very effective at getting people to recycle cans and bottles. The best curbside programs in the country don't get above 60% recycling of cans and bottles. In Iowa, we're down a little bit, but we're still in the upper 70%. So we're around 77, 78% the last time I saw a briefing on it. And that's important, especially, well, on all of it. On the cans, you're keeping stuff out of the ditches, but on the cans, that aluminum is extraordinarily valuable for recycling. Primary aluminum production creates sulfur hexafluoride, which is one of these trace greenhouse gases that's very potent. We need 100% aluminum recycling if at all possible, and you're not going to move that direction by harming the deposit. And on the glass, I remember as a parent, hate broken glass in the parks. right? Anybody who's ever had kids out in the park and there's a broken bottle. So for that reason, you kind of need as much glass recycling as possible. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'll be brief. I have a master's in business and I can't figure out the bottle bill. I've been there 2 years. They give me a sheet on it this year and it had so many details. I don't know what the right answer is on this. In a realistic answer, let me say a couple things. That water bottle right there is probably not going to end up in the ditch and it has no value whatsoever. People are pretty good about recycling. And I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I hear a lot of people say just get rid of it completely and be done with it. And then I hear a lot of people go on about the value of having the recycling value of the deposit. So I don't know what the right answer is. I will say this, as a mayor previously, multiple times we went through our recycling contracts where the recycling value got so low that our centers said, forget it, we're not going to recycle and throw it in the trash. And that happened at least 2 to 3 different times in my stint on council as mayor. So it's a value thing, it goes up and down, and I hope we do finally get a resolution to it, but it's one of those topics that I'm just not sure where we're going to have the right answer on what to do. Thank you.
The good news is our bottle bill recycling program has worked well for the state, and that more than 80% of the population are still in favor of it, having a bottle bill. Third piece of positive news is that there still is a bottle bill that's alive. I've been following bottle bill now for 8 years. There have been many versions. I think everybody here has co-sponsored one to improve and expand the bill. So there is still life in the Senate. And the other good news is that everybody has had input, I think. Grocers, industry distributors, all of us have had input into that. So it's still alive. One of the people who's involved in the majority is Representative Loshi. And there is also, he's working with the Senate on the bill there in the Senate that would expand, include more bottles and cans, would move 1 cent from the distributors to the recyclers, which would make it more feasible for them. So we're looking to see what that bill is. The bill that we see out there now, I've heard from Republicans in the House, including Loshi, that is not the final bill, that there are still input into it, and I asked for details. Well, what would it include? What would it not include? And they're mute on that. I can't get any information from them. So I'm looking forward to this next week. Maybe we'll see a good bottle bill. I certainly hope it, and I know all of us here support expansion. Thank you.
One of the interesting things about the bottle bill in my 8 years in the legislature, is how it's one of the few things where I've seen some real bipartisan conversation on this bill. There's a range of perspectives on it, anywhere from altering it, changing it, to doing away with it. I think Senator Hogue did a really good job of reminding us that some of us might not remember, especially maybe people from my generation, what things looked like before we had a bottle bill. Human behavior is human behavior. Some things don't change. We do what's easy. Even people who are really well-meaning do what's easy sometimes. So one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had in the State House was, I believe, when I was on environmental protection. A very senior member of the State House, Representative Clell Bodler, who was a retired state trooper, somebody who spent his entire professional career, probably more than 40 years of his life, driving around on the highways before I was born. And when this conversation came up among us in that committee, just as a casual conversation, I really looked to make sure that he was going to be okay, because the idea of getting rid of the bottle bill was so disturbing. And he said, I remember what it was like before we had this. There was trash everywhere because people will do what is easy. So I think the encouraging thing is that there's a bipartisan conversation, but we don't want trash all over our highways. We got to save the bottle bill.
As we started at the beginning of the meeting, talk about self-imposed deadlines. This particular bill is kind of funnel-proof. It's in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, or one version of it is anyway. I'm not sure what about the House, but I just reread it, and I was on the Senate Ways and Means Committee on Thursday morning, and it passed out of committee, and it was not a bipartisan bill, though. It was party line bill. The Democrats spoke on the bill as, kind of looks good, but this will spell the end of the bottle bill. It allows retailers to not have to take them back, and you have to, the cans and bottles, and you have to take them to a retail center. And it has to be within a 20-mile radius, or 10 doubled. And so we figure that'll work in some cities, but it won't work in rural Iowa. And then pretty soon, if Hy-Vee doesn't have to take them back, and by the way, they didn't have to take them back during the pandemic, kind of makes sense, although nobody got COVID from a can, but we all were alert to public health. Okay, so there's an executive order, they don't have to take them anymore. Well, now that's lifted, and public health is improving greatly, but they still don't have to take it back. And I'm thinking if they don't have to take them back, that should be a function of law. So this bill talks about that, and there's some strike after provisions, so there's a lot of moving parts. So stay tuned to the end. It's not through it's through our funnel. There is people on both sides talking about it, but the Republicans in the Senate are not taking any of the Democrats' ideas. And I would just echo that the fact it was very popular, and maybe we should look at expanding what's covered by it instead of this bill, which will have the effect of killing the bottle bill.
Our next topic is sales tax and the local option sales tax. So will the reduction of income tax legislation affect the sales tax or local option sales taxes here in our community? Taxes.
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
Sure, absolutely. Will the reduction of income tax legislation affect the sales tax and/or local option sales taxes in our communities? Thank you.
I can take a stab at this one and tell you that the tax legislation that the Republicans passed this session does not address sales tax nor local option sales tax. I will tell you though that we need to be careful because there are different pieces of legislation in at least the House that deals with the local option sales tax. We need to be really cognizant of the money that our local municipalities and our cities are getting, because that's something that we've seen in the past that the state hasn't always kept its promise on backfills. If we want to lower the local option sales tax and the state will backfill it, well, that hasn't always worked for everybody. So the current legislation that passed does not affect sales tax nor local option sales tax, but I think there are some bills that could impact municipalities and the services they provide to all the residents.
So sales tax, like was just said, is not part of the actual tax bill, but what happens when you no longer have the same amount of revenue to spend in your state? Money that we allocate to our cities and to our county won't necessarily be there because we don't know what's coming in now with the new tax cuts. I can tell you that with that, we could have an increase in sales tax to make up some of that money, especially when we're looking at some of the people who will not be receiving money in the tax cut. That money has to come from somewhere, but we have a lot of people who that will not be affected in those tax breaks that were passed in the House and the Senate and signed by the governor, but they will be paying probably more elsewhere to make up that revenue.
The piece that I'd like to add to this is that that piece of lost not being tied to the tax bill that came through was work of a lot of the legislators before you. We heard from communities, I heard from Fairfax, also Cedar Rapids and folks, what that would mean to lose those lost dollars. And for some of the small to mid-sized communities like Ely and Fairfax and Walford, it would really hurt them. And we had legislators and Representative McClintock, we had joint meetings with some of these communities to talk to them about what that would look like. And so it was really important, the work that not only legislators did talking in a bipartisan way across the aisle, but a lot of the communities, small, medium, and large, all did a really good job of communicating to legislators, in my opinion, and doing that work. The League of Cities did a lot of work as well to make sure that people understood what it meant when a town like Fairfax couldn't afford to pay for its fire truck that they need for their community. So it didn't go through, but it was because of a lot of work behind the scenes from legislators and communities trying to make something that was not fair and moving it to the fair side. So I want to thank the legislators that worked with us to get that piece out, and then also all the communities that did the hard work of communicating with us. Thank you.
I wanted to say that your local taxes, your property taxes, your lost, and your sales tax will be more significant and more important. I don't know that there'll be larger taxes on it, but they'll be more important and more significant to the services that you have, because the general fund of the state budget will take a hit of $1.9 to $2 billion. That's $2 billion less than we have today to spend on all of the things that the state does. And that will occur within 4 to 6 years, according to the legislative service agencies. For the first few years, we'll be backfilling it with the funds that we have now, the additional funds in the taxpayer trust and others, which will be close to $2 billion at the end of the year. But those will be used to backfill the loss in taxes. So after 5 or 6 years, we'll be in a critical condition. I don't know what the state will do, or what we'll do, but we're pushing that down with this tax cut that we're getting today. Thank you.
Yeah, lost was in the tax bill that we passed, the big tax bill that we passed earlier. It got taken out. Does that mean it can't come back up? It could. I don't think it will. Obviously, I wouldn't support loss going away because so many people count on it, and not only do they count on that money, they also, a lot of communities, they sell bonds and they're counting on that funding being there. And as the legislature would need to compensate if they were going to take that funding away. And I know backfill comes up in a lot of the tax issues that we do. We ran a bill last week. I didn't vote for it, but I was against it. But potentially backfill could be an issue down the line. And I know last year we had a bill in the budget for the backfill went away for Linn County. It was like a $5 million impact. I didn't vote for that either. But we have to take all that into consideration as we look at some of these financial impacts on that. So again, lost, to answer the question, lost is not in there, but local option sales tax potentially could come back up before the end of the session, although I don't think it will.
I would just add that, the original Senate bill on the gigantic tax cut did include a sales tax provision. It was thrown out to conform with the House, and then it passed and signed into law. So the other thing I wanted to say about sales tax in general, obviously the impact on the poor as a percentage of your income, it costs you more. Relative to local option sales tax, watch out, right? Because Senator Dawson filed another sales tax oriented bill, and it had a plethora of things in there, some good, some bad. Democrats looked at that and said, yeah, we like not taxing period products. We like not taxing National Guard weekend pay. Their current salary isn't taxed, so this is just when you do the weekend work. And we also liked a couple other little things, but those didn't add up to say, well, we're going to support this, because again, of the impact on people and their ability to pay. So this, I don't even know what the price tag is on this bill, but it's put on unfinished business calendar on Thursday, so it's still a live round. And Senator Dawson really, really wanted it, but he had to move it out of the big tax bill, so it's still a moving target. And if we do add loss to this, or if it's changed at the last minute, it will significantly impact, you know, our municipalities and local. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's always hard to gauge kind of as we wrap up the questions, but I'm going to throw one more out, and that is on the topic of law enforcement. Some statistics where traffic fatalities are up 10% between 2018 and 21, and this year deaths are up 8%. So do we need to address increased law enforcement or other ways of improving the safety of our roads?
Well, let me make a couple observations while other people think how they might respond to this. First of all, one of the things we don't do is we don't talk about the tremendous success that we have had reducing automobile fatalities over the last 50 years. In 1970, 900 Iowans a year died on the roads. 900. Since 1970, Iowans drive 4 times as much as we did in 1970. And our fatalities are now somewhere, have been between 300 and like 420. So we've cut fatalities by 2/3 while people are driving 4 times as much. How has that happened? Part of it has been effective government regulation. Crack down on drunk drivers, promote automobile safety, promote safer roads. We used to have in Iowa good driver's education, right? We had done some things that had allowed that. Do we need to continue to make progress? Absolutely, absolutely. So part of it's better enforcement, part of it is moving away from distracted driving in all the forms that it would take. One of our accomplishments when I was first in the legislature was better child safety seats. Better seatbelt use, all kinds of things we need to do, but don't forget, we've made a lot of progress. There's more to be made. Thank you.
Senator Hogue touched briefly on the distracted driving, and I think one of the main things we could do is to make sure that we pass a hands-free bill that allows officers to utilize that as a reason to pull over. Right now, it can only be a secondary issue. If something else is wrong, they can pull you over, and if they find that you've been using your phone or some device in the car, then they can deal with that, but they can't just pull you over for doing that in the first place. I think that's something we could work on, and we also need to work on a bill that would allow for, or that would end hands on a phone or device during driving.
Just wanted to point out that we're still down in the number of state troopers that we have on the highways, and I think the number right now, we need 25 more in order to cover what we used to just a few years ago. Legislature needs to fund that to make sure we put more troopers on the highways. But I understand, I think the situation is that sometimes in the evening we have a trooper for maybe 4 counties, 1 trooper.
In 1994, I applied to be a Cedar Rapids police officer. They were hiring 22 of us, and they had 600 plus applications. In the last go-around for hiring, I think they were trying to get between 12 and 15 if they could, and they had about 30 applications. So the short answer is yes, we need to do more for getting applications and applicants to get into law enforcement. And that's a problem across the spectrum in public safety. Although I still work for Cedar Rapids Police Department, my main function now is I manage the 911 center. Go back 15 years ago, I would go to hire 1 dispatcher, And I used to have to give 2 tests because we couldn't, a room like this would be full. I'd get 100 people for one position. I'm lucky to get 15 or 20 now for a dispatch position. So it's a problem across public safety. And let me say, it's a problem across the entire workforce, whether it's in medical or teachers or whatever it is. It's just an issue across the workforce entirely. But yes, and others have touched on it as well. Law enforcement is one of those areas that we need to continue to fund and take care of and fill those positions because it is an issue. And I don't know, my dad was a state trooper, by the way, and so was my older brother. I don't know what their authorized strength was years ago, but I bet they're at least 100 troopers down than what it used to be. So.
Well, Charlie, we just found out we have something in common. My dad's also a retired state trooper. We've talked about a lot of things over the years, and I think whenever you're looking at a complex problem, you need to look at what the causes of the problem are. So regarding the framing of this question, I think we really would need to look at what are the factors. Do we have more people on the road? Are more people distracted driving? What is the correct tool to address the issue? I guess it seems a little strange to be the person up here talking about government spending, but it seems like so often when we have a problem, we say, well, we'll throw this at it, we'll throw that at it. What we actually need to do is study the problem, determine the causes, and decide what is the proper tool to save lives, or what is the proper combination of tools to save lives. One final thing that I would say is that, if you are a person who thinks that we do need more law enforcement, more troopers on the road, you might wish to hold the governor accountable for sending our troopers out of the state. It appears that clearly the governor doesn't think that we need troopers on the highway here in Iowa. So if that's something that bothers you and you think more troopers on the road are needed, then you probably should contact the governor and let her know that our troopers should be here in Iowa protecting Iowans.
Just something to add to Senator Hoag's statistics. We also have better roads, but kind of the negative is we have the patrols reported to us that there's more people who are speeding over 100 miles an hour. And so, probably because of these roads, they can go that far. So there's no good reason anybody should go 100 miles an hour, even if you're law enforcement chasing somebody probably. But so they're reporting that to us. I had a buddy of mine tell me that he recently got a speeding ticket and there were 2 troopers in the car. He said, we got enough troopers out there. But that was just, something that he was, his observation. But, and actually I think we need more corrections officers than we need troopers. But I do like the banner on the highway that kind of gives us the death toll. It's kind of morbid, but it's also a reminder, buckle up, seatbelts save lives, and watch your speed. Also, the patrol reports to us that we've given them equipment fund, and they can purchase in their fleet for air wings, so they have planes that can help with speed enforcement, and it's safer than on the ground. You just send a trooper to go get the red car, mile marker 25, and we're investing in that. So we're investing in a lot of things, and they have their own special academy, so we're trying to increase recruits and hire when and where we can. Those are just my random thoughts.
Just really quickly, the things I'll add to this is that I absolutely agree with folks that have talked about the workforce shortage affecting law enforcement like it affects any other profession in our state. The couple of things I think we really need to focus on, the Governor's Transportation, GTSB, Governor's Transportation Safety Bureau Board, really works on keeping drunk drivers off the road. It's a grant funding for law enforcement agencies that can put extra patrols on during weekend hours, during night hours, during holidays, when we expect more drunk drivers on the road. They certainly need to be held accountable. And maybe I'm opening up a huge can of worms here, and I maybe shouldn't mention it, but traffic cameras in Cedar Rapids. As a law enforcement officer, a reserve deputy with Linn County Sheriff's Office, I will tell you that the traffic cameras on the S-curves in Cedar Rapids save lives. They save lives of law enforcement officers that may have to address it. The folks locally know where the cameras are, so if you're going 12 miles an hour over the speed limit, you know you're going to get a ticket. It keeps the traffic, it keeps the speed down, and that's certainly something that I think that we need to continue to invest in.
Thank you. In a moment, we will begin closing statements, but I also wanted to thank you, the audience. I know a lot of you participated in the issue voting, so thank you for your thoughts and feedback. We are actually going to provide those via email to all of our lawmakers, so you know where our audience finds weight and gravitas behind certain issues. I would also like to thank all of our legislators today for making time in their busy schedule to participate in our first live forum in a number of years. The League of Women Voters of Linn County is proud to be able to offer this service to all our citizens. I'd like to thank our host, the Cedar Rapids Public Library, and Pro Video for providing video service for our live streaming audience today. The League of Women Voters welcomes everyone to its membership. So if you're interested, see any of our members here today with the pins on, or for those virtually, see us at the lwvlinncounty.org. All right, so we will begin closing statements with Senator Hogue. Thank you.
Well, I feel like singing a farewell song, but I won't. I do want to thank the League of Women Voters for these forums over the last 20 years while I've been in the Iowa legislature. I appreciate it, and maybe I'll just kind of share this reflection on my last day here, which is the last couple of years there have been some bills that have passed through the legislature that I don't think reflect well on Iowans. The Iowa that I know and love and grew up in is a welcoming, loving state. And to attack people who are trying to address historical and structural racism, which is what happened in the 2021 session, and this year the bill attacking the transgender athletes, really diminish our state. And so I would close with the thoughts that what we need is more love in Iowa and less hate, and hopefully we can do that moving forward. Thank you.
Just want to thank everyone for attending here in person and online. And although we've passed both funnels now, we know that things can always reappear in bills, so continue to keep reaching out to us about the things that are important to you.
I again want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here today and giving us the opportunity to speak. Also want to thank all of you that are engaged, that are here today and that are watching. I'd like you to stay engaged, particularly over the next few weeks while the legislature continues its work and moves to budget from policy. That you do have an influence on what happens there, so please stay engaged with your own legislator, contact them, speak with them in person if you can, email them, let them know your issues and what you would like them to do. Thank you.
I, like others, would like to thank you for being here. Again, this is my first in-person League of Women Voters Forum. It was great to see folks in front of me. I would also like to just take a moment and thank Senator Hogue for what you've done for not just Linn County, but the state of Iowa. And I will tell you, as I thought about getting into to the political world, Rob Hogue was one that I went to for advice, for mentorship, and not one time did he ever give me bad advice or did he ever discourage me. He was gave a lot of encouraging words to get involved, and that's what I would say to you all as well. Get involved. Your voice matters. Contact us when things feel like they're getting a little bit tough. Just don't stop, keep going, because the state of Iowa needs us to be involved.
Well, I would say I'm a I'm an optimist and I'm a glasses half full kind of guy, but I feel some of my answers today were negative, and I'm always telling you about bad things. I'm really positive about things, and I would like to echo that also about Senator Hogue. One of my favorite stories I want to tell you about him is he and I used to commute together to the legislature. I would drive and he would read the budget to me, and I'm not kidding. And I would ask him questions, and I never learned the budget to those details ever since. But reading it and working with him is, and I sit next to him in the Senate, so I'm going to miss you, Rob. But at the end of my opening, I think I said there's a couple, I don't often get to pick the bills that I work on. Sometimes I'm just assigned to them. And some of them have big impact, and some of them have little impact, like shall we do E15? What all does that mean? Or shall we take the county off of the license plates? Sometimes those are like small but important issues, and sometimes they're big and momentous issues. But I enjoy the work in the legislature, and it's a process. The ethanol thing, we haven't got it all worked out. What are we going to do with ethanol? Iowa's a corn-producing state. Ethanol is cleaner. It's not the cleanest, but batteries are coming, or electric cars are coming. But I need to get gas today. So we need to work on that, and we have, Senator Zumbaugh once said, well, all the corn in Iowa's in his district. And I said, well, it may be grown in your district, but it's trucked into mine. Cargill and Quaker and everything. That's 10 more, right? But anyway, so it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having us, and we'll see you next time.
Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters. I appreciate the invite and being here. We all took the same road to get to the Capitol, so Senator Hope, thank you for your service. I appreciate that also. And Kristen running my cart also, so don't want to forget you. I would say also to the folks that attend, I say this to folks at the Capitol also that come up and see us, and to the forums and things. The people that participate get heard, and the people that get heard make a difference. So always contact your legislators. That makes a big difference. There is a silent majority out there, but we need to hear from you to be able to move legislation and to make sure that we are representing you. So I would also echo that. So thank you, and look forward to the forums in the future.
This will be said at least 2 more times. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and everybody who came today in person and who are online. Eric, I can't believe this is your first one in person, but congratulations. And to Rob, Senator Hogue has been a huge mentor and help in my career, and one of the reasons why I'm here. I had a few legislators that I have followed for many years because of their participation in the community and their being visible and out there. And I've tried to emulate that, and I hope that I have done so. But I am happy to be able to represent my area and all of the state of Iowa. But thank you to Senator Hogue for all the work that you have done in the past. And I know that you're not going away. You'll still be out there. So thank you to everybody. They've talked a little bit about the bills. I just want you to know that the doom and gloom, there are 32 bipartisan bills that went through the House this year. And so it's not all doom and gloom. There are some bad bills out there. Those are the ones that are the issues. 90% of what we do at the House is bipartisan. So we fight over those big issues, but those are the ones that we're there for, the ones that we're fighting for our people. So I thank you for being here, and hope to see you next year.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters, everybody who's here in person, everybody watching online. I checked really quickly because I had shared the forum, the link to the forum, and I know there are a few people at home watching who haven't gotten super involved in the political process in the past. If you are a person at home watching and you're not sure who your legislator is or how to contact them, the easiest way to find out is just go to Google and type in, "Who is my legislator, Iowa?" You can find it really quickly. As everybody else here has said, it really does matter when you contribute your voice to the process. So thank you to everybody who's taking the step of being here and watching at home. Thank you very much to Senator Ho, Representative Running Marquardt. One of my favorite things about politics in Iowa is that we are neighbors here. We see each other at the grocery store, we see each other at Casey's, and when I was much younger looking at getting into public service, all in the same day, I drove up Senator Hoag's driveway and dodged the chickens, and Representative Running Marquardt sent me home with tomatoes that day. So thank you to both of you for the people you have inspired. Just want to encourage everybody, to continue to get involved. You really matter. And also to remember that even when things seem a little negative, when we're having to talk about things that are a little bit of a bummer up here, I encourage you to think about it like when you have a friend who you love very much and you say, I am worried about you. So there are a lot of bright spots, but when we do have to talk about those things that are hard, it is because we care about each other and we care about our state and we know how wonderful our state is. So thank you.
I just want to thank the league. It's kind of everyone's saying that, but just jumping on that bandwagon. I am, after 13 years of being a state representative, I'm going to run for Linn County Supervisor, District 1 on the west side. I really want to, take the opportunity for an open seat to make government work for everyone and take what I've learned in the State House, putting communities before politics, and really using that here locally. I do have to say to the people who are at these tables here before me, we have all been through a lot of things together. Disasters, floods, pandemic, COVID, and we have worked together as a team. Either working with our constituents when we have a problem, we couldn't figure it out together, and I'm honored to be up here with you all, sincerely, I mean that, and all of the work that we have done, it really matters, and I'm honored to have been a part of that. I just thank the league, but thank people who are participating. If anybody would like to reach out to me, I'm very available. You can find me on social media or call me or email me, but I want to serve you and appreciate these forums over these years where people have had an opportunity to reach and connect with our legislators, because civil engagement is the way that we keep our democracy growing in our state moving forward. Thank you.
All right. And that concludes our spring series of the legislative forums, but I encourage you all to check out our website and our local papers for more information this fall as we move into candidate forums. We will continue the public discourse. Thank you everyone for coming.